Why have we been sold the idea that hell is a safer bet?
Because of who you are, every thought you think has power.
30-year-olds of today are making less or earning less than their parents when they were 30.
We know we have the people who know what to do. The problem is the people with solutions over here and the people with the power over there.
I wonder your thoughts on the potential of the country attacking itself.
The system is even more corrupt than I feared, and the people are even more wonderful than I hoped.
And we're locked in. Marianne Williamson, thank you so much for making time to do this.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You recently have a new book, The Mystic Jesus. And I'm so excited to hear your perspectives on that, because I think Jesus is it can be a really confusing concept for people, particularly young people. I think that religion is something that's kind of moving towards the wayside for young people, and distrust of politics, distrust of government, distrust of religion, this kind of like seeking of agency and trying to, I think feel safe in the world. And I think the concept of Jesus, like what does Jesus mean to you in the writing of the book, The Mystic Jesus? Because I feel like it can take on different meanings for different people.
Well, I received a phone call about 5 years ago from my publisher, who said that in the publishing world, what they were finding is that people were asking for books about Jesus that were not tied to dogma, doctrine, organized religion, or anything like that.
Yeah.
A lot of people, understandably, had moved away from organized religious institutions, and yet found ultimately that they had thrown away the baby with the bathwater. They hadn't wanted to lose the gold nuggets at the center of religious and spiritual truths. They just don't want the falsity, the inauthenticity. And Jesus himself had become a bit like a fossil, in a case in a museum. I see this within a larger context. We're living at a time of profound historical change, as you were just mentioning. It's not just religion, it's also politics. It's so much where there are two simultaneous realities. One world crumbling in front of our eyes, another world struggling to be born. And I think that we are called as a generation, and I mean all the adults among us, to be death doulas and birth doulas, to help that which needs to die, which is passing away and should be passing away, to pass away justly and compassionately and harmlessly, and to help this new world come forth. So religious institutions are no different. Spiritual traditions are no different. And Jesus is a perfect example of something which has become tied to dogma and doctrine, much of which does not work for the modern mind, even among many Christians, and a yearning to regreen, to revitalize. St. Augustine said about Jesus, he is ever ancient, ever new. Now, in the Jewish religion, it says every generation must rediscover God for itself. I feel in my political work, every generation of Americans has to rediscover the deeper meaning of the Declaration of Independence for ourselves. We imbibe ancient truths these days at too shallow a level. And so they lack moral, spiritual force and immediacy and authenticity for us. So I think Jesus is a perfect example of this. So when my publisher called me and asked me about this and said, would you like to take on this project? I said, yeah, I'm your girl. I mean, I was a little, I found it daunting. I'd been thinking of doing it for years, actually. My work is based on the principles of A Course in Miracles. The Course in Miracles is not a religion. It is a psychological mind study based on universal spiritual themes. So it's a psychotherapeutic approach to the great spiritual and religious themes, and certainly Jesus is a great religious and spiritual theme. I myself am Jewish, so I didn't come to a Christ-centered perspective, Christ-centered language from anything having to do with anything I had been taught. I've been taught that's not the book we read, honey. We read the other one. And I found it was very interesting for me when I first became a student of the Course, because I found that many of my Christian friends had a harder time with it, had more resistance to many of these things than I had, because I had never been taught anything, and they had a lot. I was learning new things. They were having to unlearn a lot of old things. So for me, this book is about a Jesus who is seen, certainly for many Christians, the Jesus in a Course in Miracles. Listen, to some, it's like, no, because they are tied and ensconced and entrenched within that institutional monopolization of his identity, and I understand that. Others, however, a lot of progressive Christians are looking for a more expansive, holistic 21st century perspective. And then people who are not Christians, such as myself, can embrace something that doesn't in any way call us out of our own religious backgrounds, or even those who are agnostic or whatever. Who is Jesus for us today, particularly within a psychotherapeutic context? The Course in Miracles says religion and psychotherapy at their peak are the same thing, because they're both the healing of the mind. So that's where I was coming from writing the book, but it's where I'm coming from as a human being.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. In the Course of Miracles, something that I wrote down actually like years ago was an excerpt. It was, why do we turn away from love? This is heaven and hell. We've been sold the idea that living in hell is a safer bet, which I think is very interesting. We've been sold the idea that living in hell is a safer bet. Love in your mind produces love in your life. This is heaven. Fear in your mind creates fear in your life. Hell. Why have we been sold the idea that hell is a safer bet? Because that resonates within me. I feel like I do that within myself. I can witness that within myself. Like, why does the human in the modern or ancient world do that? And where does that originate from your perspective?
Well, there's the theological answer and there is the psychological answer. So first of all, I think it's so interesting that you can say so casually now, because it's now part of the modern lexicon. This was not true 30 years ago. You assumed your audience would understand the thought, that thought creates our reality. Mm-hmm. That's like major. That's major. You didn't even feel the need to explain that part. So we start from there. The idea that thought is the level of cause and our human experience is the level of effect, that our human experience is like a screen onto which we project our thoughts. And the law of cause and effect, which is in essence the law of karma, is that all thought creates form on some level. That's what the Course in Miracles says. And also, an idea doesn't leave its source. So whatever I'm thinking about you, I cannot help thinking about me. I will have an instinctive desire to blame you because I'm trying to get rid of my guilt, my thoughts of guilt, but really I'm only going to feel more guilty. The golden rule says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And the reason is because they will. And even if they don't, you'll feel like they did. Now, where did this hellish loop come from? So let's talk about this theologically and psychologically. If you look at it theologically, the Course in Miracles says that it all started millions of years ago in time as we know it, although in reality it never happened at all. Because love is all that is. Love is the mind of God. It's the total oceanic field of love in which out of which we are all born, from which we could never be disconnected. It is all that is, and what is all-encompassing, the Course says, can have no opposite. So in a moment when the first loveless thought was thought, that cracked the field. It introduced a fracture into the field. But in reality, it never happened at all, because if you're having a thought that's not love, you're actually not thinking, you're hallucinating. Now, when this happened, which was millions of years ago in time as we know it, it was, the Course in Miracles calls it the detour into fear. The Course says it's the moment when the Son of God forgot to laugh. And it's the metaphysical meaning of the phrase, the original sin. It was the original non-loving thought. Now, so love being the answer to every problem, the problem occurs because love is perfect. What would love do at that moment that we chose a non-loving thought? Well, it wouldn't force us back to love, because love does not force. But in that moment, there was created in our consciousness the alternative. In books like the Urantia book, it's called the thought adjuster, right? In books like, in Christic theological perspective, it's the notion of the Holy Spirit, an eternal communication link between God and the separated sons. Now, let's talk about it psychologically. All thought, because of who you are, every thought you think has power. So if you think and creates form on some level, if you think a loving thought, you're extending love and all kinds of wonderful things are going to happen in your life is more likely to work. If you think a non-loving thought, your power is not diminished. Nothing you can do can diminish the power of your mind. You can misuse the power of your mind. So when we use the power of the mind in a way that is loveless, instead of extending love, we are projecting fear. And every thought of love, which is the awareness of our oneness, creates heaven for ourselves and others, not later but now. Life is good, we're happy, relationships work, etc. If I'm withholding love, if I'm judging, if I'm blaming, if I'm holding a grievance, if I've got a grudge, I'm holding on to the past, I'm just talking about, I'm trash talking, whatever, I'm still having an effect. Now, your question was, why would you do that? That's because all thought is intentional. So the nature of thought is not only creative, it's intentional, but it's intentional in whatever direction it's moving. So just like a loving thought is self-love, a loveless thought is in essence self-hate. So your fearful thought, and to me, a good analogy to this is alcoholism. Addiction is not just out to inconvenience you. It's out to kill you. One of the things they say in AA, which is a profound statement of universal spiritual truth, they talk about alcoholism and they say it's a progressive disease. The word inertia means the tendency of the object to move in whatever direction it's been moving until the introduction of a counterforce. So your loveless thoughts are not simply non-creative, they're dangerous. Another example to me is perfect that we all see it is in our romantic relationships. You loved this guy. Why did you say that? How could you have been so stupid? Why did you call? Why did you text? Why did you ask for that? You're like, what happened? What happened? Because that mind disconnected from love, which is called in the Course the ego mind, I love how it says the Course says its dictates in love is seek but do not find. That you're always seeking, but you are always tempted. Lead us not into temptation. Well, actually, it's leave us not, because God would never lead you into. Leave us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. This world we live in is a thought system based on fear. We are constantly tempted to find fault. And where there is the greatest love, there's an old saying, love brings up everything unlike itself. So we've all done things that we look back on and go, how could I have been so stupid? And we begin to realize, there is something in me. There is some subconscious force that was out to destroy that which I most love. Now, what modern psychotherapy does a lot is, let's explore your childhood to see where that came from. That's like saying the room is dark, so we're going to take out a baseball bat and try to hit the darkness. No, you have to. The only way to get rid of the darkness is turn on the light. And the only way to get rid of the fear is to turn on the love. Love is to fear what light is to darkness. And so that's when you replace that old model with praying for the person that you love. The spiritual path is a retraining of our attitudinal muscle, just like doing yoga, just like doing mind training. we live in a world, particularly today, we're living in a very mean-spirited moment. Everybody's so mean. We're so snarky. We're so cynical. We're so angry. It's the tenet of the times. And so it takes spiritual practice, and that's what meditation is, that's what prayer is, to train those muscles. It's one thing to understand this abstractly. We all pretty much understand it abstractly. Anybody who would be listening to your podcast already gets this abstractly. We've all read the same books now. We've all listened to the same tapes. It's now part of the modern lexicon. It's that journey without distance from the head to the heart, making it practical. And that's the work we're all involved in. And it's the work which I think will make the difference between whether or not our species even survives on this planet.
Who, from your perspective, is benefiting from the cultural zeitgeist trending towards fear?
Those who have the most money and the most power, worldly power. Notice how many of them are trying to figure out ways to leave the planet. Because the war against ourselves is a war against each other, a war against the planet. And like I said, alcoholism doesn't just want to inconvenience you, it wants to kill you. So this addiction we have to fear and to attack and to defense is literally threatening the survival of the species at this point. Yeah. That's why you can't really separate the personal from the collective. It's all the same thing.
Right.
And nobody, and I think we should also recognize no one is really benefiting. I mean, there are people benefiting short term. A complete implosion of the ecosystem will ruin everyone's day. World War III would ruin everyone's day. There's no amount of money that anyone can have to buffer ourselves from what will happen on this planet if global catastrophe on that level comes to pass. And I think the most serious minded among us recognize it could happen if we do not intervene.
Yeah. There's a fellow, Scott Calloway, he did a TED Talk recently about the kind of how the economy and politics of present is destructive towards young people and more advantageous towards older folks. One of the things that he suggested in that is that for the first time in history, 30-year-olds of today are making less or earning less than their parents when they were 30. And so we're going on this trend. And if you look at statistically, the statistics of self-harm are increasing, statistics of usage of, antipsychotic medication and anti-anxiety medication and depressant medication and, obesity. And there's a lot of sad statistics. There's also a lot of brilliance and light and amazing things transpiring at the same time. But I wonder from your perspective, what should young people be doing right now? What books should they be reading? How should they be investing in themselves, investing in their future, investing in their community? What was your suggestion for young people when statistically it's looking like they're kind of in an uphill battle? I don't know if that's objectively correct. But yeah, just what would your voice be to young people that maybe are feeling a little bit discouraged and man, this is hard to get ahead right now?
It is objectively correct. And a large part of my presidential campaign has been based on that realization. Young people today are not even 20th century people. Gen Z weren't even born in the 20th century. If they were, they just, stayed there to learn how to walk for a few years. And every century is dominated by a particular mindset. The mindset of the 20th century was very mechanistic. The mindset of the 21st century, much more whole person, much more holistic. Mm-hmm. Young people today look at their circumstances, which I do believe you objectively defined correctly. Listen, I remember speaking at Stanford and saying, even at a school like this, even with you guys being at the most elite institution, you're not assuming you're going to be able to buy one day the house that you were raised in.
Yeah.
There were a lot of nods there. So everybody gets it. Okay. And a lot of young people don't understand on the economic level, why should we be living our lives at the effect of bad economic ideas left over from the 20th century. Those bad economic ideas being an unethical, completely unfettered, soulless form of capitalism that absolutely has left them out. It's been hoarding, right? It's a systemic hoarding of wealth in the hands of a very few over the last 50 years. Okay, so given that, then what do you do with that? Many people are spiraling down. Cynicism, anger, as you were saying, self-medicating, and so forth, which pharmaceutical companies love that one. So that's one way people can go, because the system laughs at that. This is, oh, great, we can make billions off that, and they do. Okay? I think with any problem, whether it's societal or individual, we want to stand back and say, what the hell is happening? Okay? Let's understand it. Buddha talked about right thought and right action. But understanding right thought precedes right action. Okay? So there's no place within establishment politics for a deeper understanding of where we are societally, because establishment politics is the spawn of and servant to the old greed-filled order. Right? So that's one of the reasons I ran for president. I would say it and have been running it. I think it's core. Somebody's got to go out there and say, can we have a deeper conversation about this? Because people are so gaslit. People are so gaslit. So the first thing you look at is what you and I were talking about at first. One world is falling apart. The other world is striving to be born. In every single area of our society and of our civilization globally, we have the people who know what to do. We have the geniuses. We have the best practices. You could look at economics, you could look at business, you could look at agriculture, you look at healing, you could look at science. There are people already demonstrating. We could do it this way. We could do it this way. We could repair what has been broken. We could create a sustainable future. We have it. People do. The problem is the people with solutions over here and the people with the power over there. And people with solutions don't have the power, and people with the power too often don't really want to hear from the people with solutions, because their solutions don't provide the short-term profit maximization goals that serve the donor class of those people with power. Now, so we have to get it. We are living, I heard a phrase recently, chaotic. CHAORDIC. Here's the chaos. So what are we going to do? Are we going to let it just destroy us, destroy our democracy, destroy our species, destroy our planet? Really? Or are we going to see ourselves as agents of repair, giving birth to this higher order that is, you can see it, like you said, you can see it, that there are all kinds of people trying to show how we could do it differently. And that's what we have to do. But in order to do that within our country, for instance, we have got to take an outside-inside approach. And I have this conversation with a lot of people who say electoral politics is so toxic, so of the old, that we have to just create the new outside of it. Well, I've been in the belly of the beast. In fact, I'm still in the belly of the beast. Would that it were that easy. Nobody needs to tell me how toxic and corrupt the system is. However, let us not kid ourselves. That's where the levers of power exist that define whether or not 68,000 people in the United States die every year of lack of health care, whether or not weapons are sent to Netanyahu, whether or not you cannot leave electoral politics out of it. So I think that when we have a deeper understanding of what's happening here, it's like we all recognize ourselves as we're like immune cells. It's the immune system. The body has an immune system. Civilization has an immune system. People are waking up. The issue now, and I think you received this through prayer, meditation, a deep spiritual practice, what part can I play? Some of us say restorative agriculture. Some of us say healing modalities. Some of us say more caring economies. And I think politics is a collective assignment. It's not the ultimate answer, but it's a very important sector, which, if we are not careful, will destroy the whole world before we have a chance to bring forth the new solutions. When you were asking what about young people, what should they do?
Yeah.
I remember seeing graffiti. Doobie doobie. It was like, to be is to do Goethe, to do is to be Hegel, doobie doobie do Sinatra. You have to find the being that then defines the new doing. That's nonviolent, the political philosophy of nonviolence. This is why Gandhi said we must be the change. Gandhi said the end is inherent in the means. We will not create a more peaceful world from anger. We will not create a more loving world from hate. We will not create a better world until we also see the purification of our own hearts as part of the process. And that's why I think the next big step is nonviolent political philosophy, which will bring together the spiritual and the political, so that we can actually become the people that we need to be in order to discern what needs to be done and in order to be capable of doing it.
That's really beautiful. I wonder your perspective on people that are really genuinely living in like an objective hell inside of their minds, people suffering from PTSD, or people, PTSD in particular. I wonder your perspective of an approach for folks that really truly are, they're in a place of suicidal ideation, or they're in a place of like, I'm really on the edge of giving up. And I think there's interesting solutions that are now being presented in the way of, therapies using ketamine or MDMA or psilocybin and things of the like, and tying that in with talk therapy and other different, somatic-based therapies and interventions. From your life experience, I feel like you would have some really valuable wisdom in that path of someone that's really actually experiencing something that feels objectively like hell, not just I'm worried about paying rent and worried about getting ahead, but I'm actually kind of on the edge of maybe checking out of this place.
Well, there are two things. First of all, I think ex-hippies are being vindicated. Mm-hmm. And this is what we were about. We were about taking psychedelics and stopping a war machine.
Yeah.
Maybe we weren't so, we've been so like mocked. Maybe we were onto something. Yeah. So when I hear this sort of pseudo-sophisticated talk about the things that we just took, after school, sure. Of course, I think it's a good thing. And I mean that very seriously, not being glib about it. I think that the rise in a more sophisticated conversation about psychedelics, regulated and all of that, is a very good thing. And for those reasons, I think that a lot of what we call the mental health crisis is a couple of things. It's a crisis in meaning, because this soulless, unfettered form of capitalism over the last 50 years has deprived us of intense societal focus on the things that matter most. Plus the economic despair. You have 70% of Americans who report feeling chronic economic anxiety, the young people that you were just talking about who feel no hope for their future and so forth. And they're absolutely right. We are living at a time where very few Americans are hoarding not only wealth, but wealth creation opportunity. And more people are struggling just to get by. You have the majority of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck, cannot absorb $1,000 unexpected expenditure. However, this is what's important to remember. To everybody who's feeling anxious, it's very important that we not be too precious with ourselves. Who's not? Okay? This is, when I ran for president in 2020, there was a lot of criticism of me. This one they don't do now because they know their perspective was debunked. This idea, they kept talking about clinical depression, chemical imbalance in the brain. No, it's a chemical imbalance. This was a way to displace blame and accountability. If you live in a society where you see no hope, this is not just about your brain chemistry. It's about the insanity of the times in which we're living. And I've been saying for years in my work, sometimes being anxious and depressed is a functional response to the situation in which you live. If you have a broken leg, the fact that the brain produces pain, physical pain, is a functional response of the body. If someone feels no pain, sometimes people are born that way, they feel no physical pain. That's more dangerous. That means you could break your hand and you wouldn't even know it. Psychic pain is the same. Sometimes we feel psychic pain because something's going on here that must be addressed. That's why the idea of just numbing the pain is the last thing we should be doing. You need to be really awake to the pain in order to things have to change on this planet. And if you don't allow yourself to feel your own pain, you're more likely to be vulnerable to desensitization to the pain of others. And I also have to say, and I'm not in any way minimizing the pain you mentioned, but I think a lot of the Americans who feel what you just said ought to think about the pain of living as a woman in Saudi Arabia today, or in Iran today, or living in Ukraine today, or living in Gaza or in Israel today. I mean, I do think there is a level on which this generation needs to toughen up.
Yeah.
And to realize, when I was a freshman in freshman in college, I was living in outside Los Angeles, and there was an earthquake. And I was living in a dorm, and this big earthquake happened, and we all ran into the hall. And there was this one girl who stayed in her room. Help me, help me, help me. And we all burst out laughing. She apparently thought she was the only one going through this. And I think that's so important. When you mention the things that people are going through, we're all going through it right now. These are tough times. We need to get that. These are tough times between environmental breakdown, the economics of class that have an ever shrinking group of people with the resources of economics and economic opportunity. With so many of the things going on now, if you're not depressed, what's wrong with you? And then you go, okay, how are we going to join together, be adult enough to know, this is a moment in history. And the challenge is not for me to hide, put my head under the covers. And even with the psychedelic thing, which I think is a good thing, I'm not putting that down at all. But even then, it's not just so that life is fun or even that you feel better, but that you saw something. You saw something when you were there. I remember when I was 17 years old, and that experience and saying, I remember the words, if Nixon saw this, there would be no war. That's the point of Enlightenment experiences, which now what do I do with what I have seen? And that I believe is the moment we're in.
Do any times in your life stand out as being transitional points of awareness or a deeper sensation of knowing yourself? Is there any pivotal moments that stand out in your life?
Of course. I think that's true of everybody. I mean, everybody's on a spiritual path. Some people just don't know it.
Yeah.
Everybody's going through deep experiences. Some people just won't look at them. Sometimes it's a love affair. Sometimes it's having a child. Sometimes it's a marriage. Sometimes it's for myself, what I have been through over the last year is running for president is definitely has opened my eyes to things I would have hoped never to see. And I'm still trying to integrate what that means and understand what the calling of my soul is. The system, the political establishment in our country, however toxic and corrupt you might think it is, I'm telling you, it is more so. And I am not the same person from having seen this, but I am in the middle of the alchemical process of trying to understand every piece of it, process it, learn from it, grow from it, and know what to do with it.
Can you share anything that you've learned that has been surprising or perhaps challenging?
I wrote an article that was on my Substack the other day. It's called Love, Democracy, and Gangster Politics. When I was asked after I ran for president in 2020, and I've been asked this phase of my work as well, what have you learned from running for president? And I have felt the same response this time as last time, but even more so. The system is even more corrupt than I feared, and the people are even more wonderful than I hoped. When you run for president of the United States, you travel a lot, and you are involved in what is conceivably the most important collective conversation that we could be having as citizens. And my experience there is more than positive. It's inspiring. The American people have a decency. The American people have an intelligence. I'm not saying we're better than anyone else. We're not, but we're not worse either. Yeah. And I also believe that we have a nobility ready to be called forth. And what I saw in this race, even more than last time there was just such a, like, we just got to get rid of Trump. We just got to get rid of Trump. And so that obsession was such a sole focus. And people realize now it turned out to be not so simple as that, because certain things have been let out of the bag. So it's a phenomenon that goes, it's bigger than one man. Yeah. This time, engaging with people, and what, like I said, one of the reasons I've run is because we must have a deeper conversation. You know, Gandhi said, politics should be sacred. He didn't mean it should be doctrine or dogma of a particular religion. He meant it should come from the deepest parts of ourselves. Like if we have a deep conversation in a book or in a podcast, that's the level of conversation we should be having politically. Yeah. But the political establishment mitigates against that kind of depth, because that's one of the ways they retain their power. Keep it shallow. And within that shallowness, they create and invent narratives that they sort of entrance people with. So I saw in individuals, in audiences, a leaning in. You know, people would say to me, where do you see hope? And I would say, I see hope in the fact that not one person tonight took out their phone. I see hope in the fact that this room gets it, that we're in trouble and we need to have a serious adult conversation. I said, when it comes to our individual lives, if you hear your child has cancer, if you hear someone that you love died, in our individual lives, we become adults so quickly in the faces of a crisis. But in our collective experience, we've been trained to think like sixth graders. So in politics, we all go dumb. So what I saw is that the people are ready. The people of the United States are ready. We have ancestors who handled slavery. We had ancestors who handled the institutionalized oppression of women. We had ancestors who established organized labor. We had ancestors who desegregated this country. But we are behaving collectively like the first generation that's going to wimp out on doing the job because we have acquiesced to a system and farmed out our critical thought processes to these political parties and political elite. And what we have in this country is a political media industrial complex. So what we've got is a matrix of corporate power, which is basically corporate overlords, no different than the landed gentry that we repudiated in 1776. Insurance companies, pharmaceutical, big agriculture, big food companies, big chemical companies, oil companies, gun manufacturers, and defense contractors. They are a matrix of corporate overlords. It's an economic tyranny. Their short-term profit maximization goals has become our new bottom line. And that organizing principle has replaced democracy. We're not functioning as a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Now the problem is the political parties are behaving in exactly the way George Washington, in his farewell address, warned us that they would become, he said, factions of men more concerned with their loyalty to their party than to their country. So these political parties, and listen, I'm a Democrat, so I'm not, I have no illusions about how much the Republican Party has been bought and sold by these corporate interests. But even in the Democratic Party, the entire party system, what's often called the corporatist duopoly, they now not only chop wood and carry water for those corporate forces, they are corporate forces. So the political party, for instance, the Democratic Party, it's a political media industrial complex. So there's Fox and the GOP, and then there's CNN and MSNBC with the Democratic Party. So, for instance, I ran for president. The founders said, in order to be qualified to be president, you had to have been born here, you have to be 35 or older, you have to have lived here for 14 years. It didn't say you had to have been a congressman or a senator. It just said the people of any generation basically were left to decide for themselves what skill set you feel is the most necessary in order to face the challenges of this time and lead us through it. But we're living at a time where the DNC felt that it had the right to curate the election. Now, candidate suppression is a form of voter suppression. So they work with CNN to make sure that the candidate they don't want is never on. Same with MSNBC, which is complete journalistic malpractice. Yeah. Because if you're running as a Democrat and you're never on CNN or MSNBC, there's no way the people in the United States who vote Democrat know that you're even there. And last time I was on CNN, I was on MSNBC, I had a CNN town hall. This time, now, not only have they reverted to a kind of Tammany Hall politics where, a bunch of men sit around a table, I guess, at least figuratively smoking their cigars, thinking they have the right to say, we have decided it's Joe. But the traditional Democratic voter has become so codependent that no, it has to be Joe, it has to be Joe, it has to be Joe. Even though, no, and they would fall for this idea that when there's an incumbent, we don't primary that incumbent. Well, excuse me, we primary incumbent senators and congresspeople all the time. And when I was growing up, Lyndon Johnson was the incumbent president, Bobby Kennedy Sr., and Eugene McCarthy primaried him. Nobody thought that was weird. We just thought it was democracy. But people just are in a trance, like we have to do it that way, we have to do it that way, we have to do it that way. And to have lived there and to see what they do, the character assassination, the infiltration, the psyops, the suppressing candidacies. When you run for president, you get a call from the FBI. The FBI calls you in, and they said, Ms. Williamson, we're going to give you a briefing, and this is the exact briefing we give to every candidate. Okay? You should look out for these things which are to be expected. And then they say the main perpetrators of these shenanigans are Russia, China, or Iran. I saw all of them and experienced all of them, and they did not come from Russia, China, or Iran. They came from right here. So we are more of a controlled society than we even know. Because if you have a few people who say, oh yeah, you'll get to vote, but we're going to basically decide who you're going to be exposed to, or we're going to make sure that we create a doppelganger about that person. In my case, kooky, crazy, mean. It's like 16th century witch burning. Ooh. So that you won't possibly take her seriously. So what you've got is that the people aren't the problem. The problem is a political system that acts like a fist that in the various ways we've discussed here are sitting on top of the voice of the people lest it become too pesky. And what you get out of that is the inevitable, dysfunctions that we see and that will only get worse unless and until we break that seal.
I wonder, do you feel like something I think is interesting is the inevitable temporality of a nation or an empire? I think it's the average length or duration of empire is around 500 years based off of what I've read. And I think the idea that you assume as an American that just like, this is it. We're always going to be on top, and we're the best. We're the greatest. Hoorah! Which simultaneously, in that same TED talk I was watching, the percentage of 18 to 35-year-olds that are considered proud to be American, or extremely proud was the language used, was under 20%. And then the people over 55 was much higher. It was like over 50%. So the morale of young Americans seems to be diminishing. I wonder, from your perspective, living the life that you've had, if you feel as though you've witnessed any pivotal transitions, maybe like getting off the gold standard, for example, or maybe, I don't know, Kennedy assassination, or some type of moment where it's kind of like, oh, that was a inflection point, and things kind of went from America really being the greatest country on the planet, or, it's obviously a subjective concept, to something that's like, oh, we kind of made a shift. And if we keep going in this direction, the empire will inevitably fall, or maybe, something very uncomfortable for the citizens.
There's a lot to deconstruct there. First of all, chapters begin and chapters end in any person's life and in any system's life. The post-World War II order had some very good things to it, and it also gave birth to some very negative things. So nature will not support the continuation of that which is ultimately unjust. And so, yes, the very fact that it had become an empire, right, certainly an economic empire, could not stand. Now, the fact that young people do not feel the hope that older people do is totally understandable, because for those of us who are older, we remember a time when you marched in the street and it made a difference. We remember a time when we marched in the street and it ended the war. We remember a time when we marched in the street and it led to desegregation. You have something like Black Lives Matter, which was the largest protest movement in the history of the United States, and it did not lead to one fundamental legislative change. That's how sewn up the system is. Okay? So I understand young people not feeling hope, not feeling an allegiance to a system. I understand these young people say, what has global capitalism ever done for me? They look at the same people their age in other advanced democracies who have health care, who have tuition-free college and tech school, who get paid family leave and subsidized childcare and guaranteed living wage. So they're not wrong to say, don't tell me how great it is here. The issue is to remember, other generations didn't owe you anything so much as every generation is dealing with what it deals with. Fix it.
Yeah.
It's an attitudinal shift. We have to change it. Now, I do think the Kennedy assassination, the fact that we never totally got the scoop on what happened, I think it did make a difference. I think the fact that Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon made a difference. But the largest issue was this explosion of trickle-down economics, a complete shift in the economic paradigm, by which, as I said before, democracy was basically replaced as our organizing principle, including economic democracy, including any idea that this country is supposed to belong to all of us, was replaced with this trickle-down economic theory where people were totally bamboozled into thinking that if all we did was to create policies that enabled greater wealth for the stockholder class, that will benefit everyone because they will become job creators, those newly rich, and the money will trickle down and lift all boats. Well, now we see what a pernicious lie that was. It has led to a $50 trillion transfer of wealth away from 90% of the American people. And it has done what you should have realized it would do, because their business model was never job creation, it was job elimination and union busting and union demonizing and everything for the stockholders at the expense of other stakeholders, such as the workers or communities, the environment, et cetera. Then there was the monopolization. You asked one of the pivotal points, inflection points, the passage of the Telecommunications Act in 1996. Whereby just a few corporations were able to just monopolize information. When I was growing up, the same company was not allowed to own the the TV station and the newspaper and the radio station, because it was codified into law that there was a guarantee of the diversification of information.
Right.
This is destroyed in independent news, et cetera. All of these things, by the way, I think we're at a point where a critical mass of us understand all this.
Mm-hmm.
This is not, I think we've really reached a new point. You meant when you and I first started talking and I said, isn't it interesting, this whole idea that your thoughts create your reality? We're now at a point spiritually, metaphysically, psychologically, and politically. The era of data collection is over. We get it. Enough of us get it. Enough of us get it that we don't need more data analysis. We need more courage. And we need more work on, just like when you do yoga or exercise to prepare your body to be strong enough, you do spiritual practice, mindfulness, prayer, meditation, whatever, to prepare your nervous system to take on the situation that we're faced with. But like I said before, other generations took on slavery. They took on the institutional suppression of women. They took on the Gilded Age. They took on segregation. We have got to toughen up. And we have got to, I think, not only identify the powers of the problems in the past, but identify with the problem solvers. We need to show up. This is not a time for men to act like boys or for women to act like girls. A real profound level of maturity is called for now. Psychological maturity, emotional maturity, intellectual maturity, political maturity. And we need to stop coddling in ourselves as well as in each other. Oh, are you okay today? Are you okay today? We need to say to each other, what great thing are you planning today and how can I help? That needs to become the tenor of our conversations.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of an aversion to communicating too much in the way of like the statistical trend of everything's going to hell, because it perpetuates victimization.
Absolutely.
And it can kind of be like an excuse. And
Almost
reality.
I agree. Yeah. We need to stop. I think one of the things that has made me change the most in places where I've needed to change is when people I respect look at me like I'm pathetic. And we need to hear people going like that. And they just need to get like, it needs to stop we need to stop coddling that stuff.
Yeah. Something that I'd like to ask that I feel like you might just want me to edit out or not have a much of a comment on. I wonder your thoughts on the potential of the country attacking itself, such as the idea of like the conspiracies, quote unquote conspiracies around the Kennedy assassination, or the conspiracies around the World Trade Centers, or like the plethora of different conspiracies, of the suggestion that perhaps the CIA or there was inside involvement on these things. And like, that's a really scary thought for someone to be able to digest. Or do you think that all of that, like, that's an impossibility, that the country would do something to attack itself in those ways?
I think that good citizenship demands a certain amount of healthy skepticism. When John Kennedy was assassinated, it's not like people are only talking about it now. At the time, there was talk about the possibility of CIA involvement. So I find, like being an older person is so interesting, because young people think they're the first people to have ever read Noam Chomsky. They think they're the only people to have ever got, maybe the CIA's got something going on. Like we got that too. And I think when it comes to the Kennedy assassination, the idea that there was domestic involvement is not even considered outrageous conspiracy theory anymore. I mean, there are conspiracies, right? I don't personally relate to, listen, I don't think we know exactly what happened on 9/11. Don't get me wrong. But listen, people asking questions, if you do not have an appropriate way for people to have conversation, and if you don't allow for it, if appropriate questioning is suppressed, what it's going to do is come out the other side in some outlandish possibilities, et cetera. So, I think in a free society, anybody should say what they want to say, but I think it's dangerous, not that people say certain things, but that there is so little trust in our institutions that people think it's reasonable to talk certain ways, but I hold the institutions accountable for having become such protectors of an old, unjust order that people know they're being constantly gaslit.
Do you as president, do you feel like you would be able to reclaim some level of trust or dignity or respect within those institutions and within politics in general for people to actually regain trust and feeling like, oh yeah, like I'm not constantly in this place of questioning authority. I'm actually a fan of authority. Like I trust it.
Yeah, there's a yin and a yang. Well, it depends on whether or not it's trustworthy. I mean,
Yeah.
we do need to have trustable and trustworthy
Yeah.
authority. But, the abusive parent is not trustworthy authority.
Yeah.
Does the parent need to be authority? Yes, but not if they're abusive, molesting, etc. Okay. The question that you asked me, I've been asked a lot on the campaign trail, and it's a very important question. The president of the United States does not have a magic wand. We don't want the president of the United States to have a magic wand. That's not how we operate in a free society. There are three co-equal branches of government. So a president cannot, nor should the president be able to go in and say, it's going to be this way because I say so, right? However, let's not minimize the power of the presidency. Franklin Roosevelt said the most important role of the presidency is not administrative, but moral leadership. One of the most important powers of the presidency is the bully pulpit. So I feel that in my campaign, I have laid down a more authentic truth. Just like you were talking, I see my work politically as very similar to my work spiritually. I'm a popularizer. I take this big conversation and then I bring it to people and I go, hey, look, this is what's really happening. And we go, oh, yeah, in a digestible way, right? So to have a president who lays down what's really happening and how we need to cut the cord with an aberrational chapter of American history that has been dominated by trickle-down economics, neoliberal economics, which has guaranteed that a few would get very, very wealthy at the expense of the many having a harder and harder time to survive. We must cut the cord. We need fundamental economic reform. We need the things they have in every other advanced democracy, such as Medicare for all, such as tuition-free college and tech school, such as subsidized childcare, and so forth. Now, would I, as president, just be able to make it happen? Well, first of all, no, because that's not the way our system works, but would have the power of the presidency. Now, whether it's me, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, or anyone else, you hope that you have the House and the Senate in your party and people who want to go with you on this. And then it depends on all of that. But we need a season of repair. We need an economic U-turn in this country. We're headed for the iceberg, economically, environmentally, on so many levels. We're 6 inches from the cliff. We've got to turn it around. As president, could I turn the whole thing around? No, but I could get us around the curve. And then you hand it over to a younger generation to take from there.
Thank you so much for doing everything you've done. Just your whole life, like the life that you've lived, is really, really inspiring. I think you've acted as a really important light to millions of people, a lot of people. And so I feel like I wonder at this point in your life, like what brings you solace with your journey? What brings you fulfillment? What makes you feel whole at this point in your life?
I wrote a book called A Woman's Worth once, and I quoted a German woman who said, in youth you learn, in age you understand. And I couldn't have recognized when I wrote that book at the age of 40, really how true that becomes. You get to a certain age where you're just trying to figure out what just happened. What just happened? A lot of people talk about understanding your childhood. You get to a certain age, you want to understand what happened between 20 and 50. What happened? And it's very profound getting older. Carl Jung said, those who fail to deal with the topic of death rob the second half of life of its meaning. Mm-hmm. I don't know how people who haven't come to some sort of spiritual terms with death, do it. But if you have, and I have, there's a like, wow, I just want to get it done. There's a real sense that older people have, whatever it is, got to do it now, got to do it now. And there's the solace sounds like, oh, okay. It's not solace. It's okay. Got to get it done. Got to get it done. That's kind of where I am, trying to understand. And I think both spiritually and politically, I've delved into the deeper waters, whether it's the mystic Jesus or, running for president. And I just want to help put it together for myself and others in a way that might be helpful. What gives me solace is the belief that I can grow from what I've been through and become a wiser person and hopefully help pass that on.
I love that. Yeah, there's a bit from, well, it didn't specifically come from Ram Dass, but someone that Ram Dass was talking to through a channel, and he was asking about death. I'm sure you've heard this before. He said, what's death like? He said, death is like taking off a tight shoe, and death is...
was interesting that you say that. Actually, that was, there was a channel material, someone named Bartholomew years ago.
Yeah.
Well, I think somebody said that on the that must be something from the internet.
I messed that up. He said the Ram Dass channel was, I conflated it. And the Ram Dass channel was death is completely safe.
Yeah. No, I tell them it's completely safe. All those things. No, those things were around. Those things were around while Ram Dass was still here. But maybe he repeated them.
No. It was a thing that was during a Ram Dass discourse when he was young, Richard Alpert, whatever. Yeah. He was talking to somebody and having a channel. But I think that's there at the root. Culturally, there's a lot that could be done from a spiritual level, if you dare use language like that as a young American, which now I think is becoming more common. At least I experienced that in my own life. And the kind of the infrastructure of our perspectives in the world, I think that if we lived in a culture where conversations like death could come out of the closet, that's more Ram Dass language. And it could be something that's like normalized, and we can talk about sex, and we can talk about birth, and birth is fine. We're okay with birth. We're scared of death. Sex, too much. Don't want to talk about it. There's all these really big conversations that I think end up creating a lot of contraction, like deep inside of us, that manifest in various different ways that we might not even be aware of. But I think death is one of those really big ones. If you could come into right relation with that, it would probably affect things on many levels, including, eventually it would trickle up into the political level as well, I imagine.
Well, that takes me back to the original conversation about Jesus, because if you look at the old and, calcified, fossilized doctrinal context of Christianity, he died and he rose doesn't mean anything. I mean, it means a lot to billions of people. Please don't get me wrong. But to the people looking for a more expansive, enlightened perspective. But if you open it up and you go, what just happened? What being told there is exactly what you're saying, which is, wait, the body goes, but something lives on. What are we talking about here? Mm-hmm. Perfect example.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Where should people go from here? I really appreciate having to have the time and presence with you, and I can really feel the caring from you. And
thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Well, for the spiritual, go to Marianne.com. For the political, go to Marianne2024.com. I am still on the ballot in a few states, actually. Maryland, Kentucky, Oregon, Idaho, District of Columbia, New Mexico, South Dakota, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. President Biden has won the nominate. I have a problem with the word "won" there, considered how engineered the whole thing is. However, he has achieved the number of delegates to be the nominee. However, in those states that I just mentioned, to the extent to which I can get votes, and we've already gotten over 400,000, which is not nothing given the incredible obstruction, then it increases the possibility I can be at the convention to discuss such things as Department of Peace, ending the drug war, a just economy, a just transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy, Medicare for all, tuition-free college and tech school, guaranteed living wage, et cetera. So there are so many ways that the system clamps down any conversation that would challenge its dominance. And I appreciate anything anybody does to help me stay in that conversation till the very end. So once again, Marianne.com for the spiritual and Marianne2024.com for the political. And I appreciate you giving me a platform during which we spoke about both.
Yeah. I look forward to getting to hopefully do this again in person at some point and getting to connect that way. And that's it. That's all. Thank you all so much for tuning in. See you next week.